John 3. A lot of it sounds super familiar. It feels like a big repeat. Love, love. The theme of love all over again. At the beginning of the week, I thought, oh gosh, here we go again. Love. How are they going to get tired of this topic? Is there anything new here? Is this kind of a repeat of the Gospel of John and 1 John 2? And oh boy, wait till next week or beyond for 1 John 4 with the topic of love. Very familiar territory. Love one another. The whole text begins with, see what love the Father has given us. So it starts with love and an example of love. And the example given is that God has made us children of God. So soak that up. That's also in the Gospel of John, chapter 1, that is our true identity. That might be helpful for us this week. Maybe we've been called other things this week. Maybe we've been accused of some stuff this week. So if nothing else, for 1 John chapter 3, have this takeaway. Your core identity, no matter what anybody says, no matter what anything you've been accused of, your identity is child of God. You are a child of God, no matter what. So this identity is threaded across chapter 3, child of God, and so is another moniker, beloved. Beloved, little children, beloved. So there's this beautiful relationship that is part of chapter 3. The relationship of God to the listeners, a relationship of love, and you are children of God, the God of love, and then the writer describes them as beloved. So there's this beautiful, loving relationship there that is at the core of understanding the first letter of John. But then 1 John 3 kind of goes to extremes. So it was kind of amusing. In both Bible studies this week, people were kind of like, whoa, that's a little extreme. So familiar territory, 1 John 3 talks also about hate. So hate was kind of our theme last week in contrast to love. So 1 John 3 also talks about hate, but then takes it to such an extreme. If you hate somebody, you are a murderer. So that seemed a little extreme. Like, oh my gosh, really? Wow, that's extreme. And then I'm going to dig a little bit more into 16, 17, and 18 here. Oh, wait, I'm going to share one other thing. As an extreme, talking about love and hate, the text talks about Cain, the bad boy of the Old Testament. Like, how does Cain fit into all of this? So the text says, don't be like Cain. So do you remember Cain? Remember the story of Cain? I went back and looked again. It's in Genesis chapter 4. Who is Cain? Cain is the son of Adam and Eve, the first son. Anybody know what Cain is famous for? Yep, killing his brother, Abel. So the text says, don't be like Cain. Yeah, okay, we got that. Don't be like Cain. So Cain murdered his brother. So as biblical people, we are sobered by how difficult it is to love one another, especially when the first family story of the Bible is fratricide, murder. Another note, this is within a family, hate within a family. And it's another reminder of something we talked about last week, that the dispute The problem in 1 John is an inner dispute among people who have the same beliefs. They're both saying that they're Christ-shaped people. So, so the author is trying to help them sort out a dispute. And in the midst of this, don't be like Cain. Don't be a murderer. Don't kill your brother. That's pretty good, pretty stark advice, pretty extreme advice. So now I'm going to focus a little more deeply on some other extreme language on love. 16, 17, and 18. Well, what is love? For 1 John 3, he says, we know love if we know Christ. And what did Christ do? Christ sacrificed his life. That's what love is. Oh. So when we've talked about love across the Gospel of John and now in 1 John, it's not every week that we talk about sacrifice as an element of love. Jesus laid down his life. He died as a form of love. That's love. And then 1 John 3 says we ought to do the same. Sacrificial love. So that's pretty extreme. That's kind of love on steroids. John goes on to say, well, what is that sacrificial love? What does that kind of love look like? Okay, it's Jesus. Jesus is sacrificial. We should be sacrificial in our love. The next verse says, for example, if we see someone in need, we should be helping them. That's love. If we have something and someone else does not have, we should share. That's love. That's love. And in case we've missed the point, the next verse, so this is 16, 17, 18. 18 says, we should not just love with words, we love with truth and action. Love in action. Whew. That is love in our tradition, in the biblical tradition. So let's walk it back again to Jesus and love as sacrifice. I think we can't forget that. Jesus wasn't just some nice man. Jesus wasn't just some powerful teacher. Jesus didn't just do nice things here and there. He died. He sacrificed himself for the good of others and for the sake of a greater thing. That is what Jesus did. That is what sacrifice is. And John says, we should do the same. Sacrifice. So that's one reason that plus sign that you see in churches is not a plus sign. It is a cross, and the cross reminds us of sacrifice. Not sacrifice as a guilt trip, but sacrifice of the lengths of love of who God is. God didn't do stuff to gain power or attention or whatnot. God is known in Jesus, who was killed, who experienced every fail that society had to offer. Every single element of society failed Jesus. And yet, there is a stronger force in the universe than what happens in the world. Such is the force of love that God has. So we trust that when we sacrifice. We trust the bigger picture of love. So that's sacrifice. Then with the other parts of those verses, well, what does it mean for us to lay down life? Is it about talking? No, for us to lay down life, which is a form of sacrifice, which is a form of love, we help others. And we don't just love with words, we love in truth and in action. I was surprised to find myself thinking about Matthew 25. I didn't realize that Matthew 25, 31 through 46, was right there in the middle of 1 John 3. Matthew 25, which is a signature text in the Presbyterian Church the last 3 years and ongoing. Matthew 25 is a parable. And parables, generally, are stories on steroids. Kind of like 1 John 3 is love on steroids, like, whoa, that's extreme love there. Parables do the same thing. They're not literal stories, but they're stories that grab you by the collar and get you thinking about what's right and wrong. Matthew 25 is a story that depicts the end of time. And there we are in heaven, and the Lord is separating people, sheep and goats. Sheep are the good ones. And what's the criteria for sorting out whether someone's a sheep or a goat? It's how people treated others. When did I see you hungry, Lord? When did I see you thirsty? When did I see you a stranger? When did I see you naked or sick or in prison? When did I see you in that situation of being vulnerable and weak and rather pathetic? When was that you, Lord? It was when you saw anybody in that situation. Whenever you saw that person and tended their need, you were ministering to me. You were tending to me. You were love, not with just words. You were actually loving in truth and in action. Well, these stories this week reminded me of a veteran I heard speaking recently. And he was saying, soldiers, when they go off to serve, they're expected to sacrifice, and even sacrifice to the point of laying down their life and dying, giving up their entire life. That's the expectation, sacrifice. Then he drew a connection to, can we not expect that of all of our parts of society? Public officials, people who serve others? Can we not expect sacrifice there? Perhaps not the sacrifice of life, but other forms of sacrifice. What would sacrifice look like across, say, public officials, public servants? What does sacrifice look like there? Now, I know we all like to slam our system. I'll say our political system. And we like to be cynical about our political system. And sometimes this drives us to apathy about our political system. And yes, there are bad characters across every time and space in political systems because they're human. What are we to do, especially as Christ-centered people? And part of our system is, we do expect people who are involved in the military to sacrifice, and we are very grateful for that, and what an incredible model for that. But how does that inform us in other parts of our society? And that's just society, that's let alone our faith. What does sacrifice look like? Well, I'd say, regarding our system, which we're all frustrated with, one step is acknowledging Human societies have a political system for a reason, to solve problems, to do things. So it still exists. It is possible, that political systems can work, even if they're flawed at times or dysfunctional at times. I think we're not called to be apathetic. So, with political systems. But I'd also say that political systems are undergirded by a society's ethics. Ethics influence what the political system looks like. We get the political system we deserve. We, as Christ-centered people, need to take that to heart. What are our ethics? What do we believe? What does it mean to be biblically centered and have biblical values? Well, it's very sobering when we think about it. We look at the Bible and we see Cain. Whoa. It's hard to love one another. It's hard to even love our own brother. Wow. And so, as biblically centered people, we acknowledge it's hard, and whatever we do in society, we need to be patient because it's hard. So I think we, as biblically centered people, are realists about how hard it is to love one another. Right there, the first story of family, bam, murder. It's hard. As Christ-centered people, what are we to do? Jesus was mowed down, trashed by every element of society, including his own followers. Well, we have hope and faith in a God of love and a God of power and a God of justice beyond our ordinary human lives. We have this hope. And we have guidance. That guidance you're getting tired of hearing about, the guidance of love. And not just words about love, not just words about love, but acts of love. So how do we know love? We know love is sacrificial. It's not about ego. We know love is about looking out for people who are hungry, who are sick and need medical help, and people who are sad. Those are our criteria. As Christ-centered biblical people, we say, so who's helping with that? How does this connect with addressing hunger? How does this address helping with medical needs? How does this address sadness? We are very practical, and everything else is just hoo-ha and theatrics. What helps us do those things? We are responsible for holding ourselves and others accountable for love in action and love in practicality. How will we do that? How will we do that? God's advice to Cain, because we are all Cain at times. God's advice to Cain in Genesis 4, verse 7, essentially is get a hold of yourself. Get a grip. Self-mastery. Don't just do whatever you want to do. Get a grip. When we master ourselves, when we discipline ourselves, and I'd say the discipline is the excellent way of love, we are in a position to see what's true and what's helpful and what is just blah, blah, blah. As Christians, we are called to wisdom, to distinguish between, what is light and what is mere heat, what is fuel and what is just gaslighting. We are called to wisdom. How? How are we going to solve these deep problems? And not lose hope in the meantime. The text also in chapter 3 says we have such hope. We have a hope to be like him, to be like Christ. That's the journey of being like Christ. So let's call for the Holy Spirit to help us out. Let's have hope, and let's be extraordinarily practical in how we practice love. And who knows, God may be using us to break the mold of societal dysfunction. To God be the glory. Amen.